Hi, I am Luciano Vecchio, a comic book artist, and you're listening to the Nerd Byword.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into yet another episode of the Nerd Byword podcast. We have a special episode for you. We have a sit-down interview with Luciano Vecchio, comic artist. You've seen his work in Marvel Comics. You've seen him in DC Comics. He also has a creator-owned graphic novel that is available on Comixology called Sereno. But first, we've got to hit our nerd news segment as always. Dave, what do you have for us this week?
This week, I am fired up. I am about as fired up as I've probably ever been on this podcast. So Jason Schreier...
Angry German!
Oh, you got something coming today. Jason Schreier, formerly of Kotaku, and now a member of the staff at Bloomberg, recently wrote an article about French video game developer Ubisoft. In the article, several former employees accused the developer of mishandling sexual misconduct claims within the company. There's a lot to unpack in this article, which easily could lead to an episode-long discussion. Instead, I want to focus on a much smaller part of the overall story. On Twitter, Schreier revealed, and I quote, "The developers of Assassin's Creed Odyssey wanted Cassandra to be the only playable lead, but Ubisoft's marketing team and creative lead wouldn't allow it. Women, they said, don't sell." First off, some of my favorite games of this generation had female leads, including Horizon Zero Dawn, the rebooted Tomb Raider games, and Control. What I found particularly enjoyable about these female leads is that they were not sexualized like so many other video game characters are. They were fully realized characters, not designed for the male gaze. They're simply awesome characters. Ubisoft's approach to making and marketing video games makes no sense to me. Ubisoft seems to operate under the assumption that most video game players are males, which is barely true anymore. According to Statista.com, 46% of all gamers in 2019 were female. Second, Ubisoft seems to believe that males only want to play games using male avatars, and that's nonsense too. I don't care if my playable character in a game is male, female, gender neutral, or a robot. I just want an interesting story and fun game mechanics. So I find this whole thing to be infuriating. In this day and age, these attitudes are absolutely 100% tone deaf. Chris, what do you think about this?
I'm infuriated as well. I match both of our German ire is coming out today. That's exactly what I said. Lara Croft would like a word if female characters don't sell. Evie Fry from Assassin's Creed Syndicate. This really irks me because Assassin's Creed is one of my favorite game franchises. Like, it's one of the few that I will spend money on as soon as it comes out. It's the one of the few things I'm ready to pre-order. It's Assassin's Creed Valhalla. It's one of the few things as a history nerd. Historical fiction is one of my favorite literary genres. I'm all about the Three Musketeers. I'm all about the Count of Monte Cristo. You can always get me. You can always hook me with historical fiction. But now I'm revisiting this. Now I hope they change in the future because I would like to continue enjoying these franchises. But it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, like, here's the hit list of I looked on thegamer.com for, like, they had a top 20 of, like, female protagonists, and these are just some of the ones that just roll off the top of, my head. Lara Croft, Tomb Raider. Evie Fry from Assassin's Creed Syndicate was one of the strengths of that game. The Resident Evil franchise and the films as well have a female protagonist. Cassandra from Assassin's Creed Odyssey. For my fellow Assassin's Creed fans, 70 to 80% of people chose Cassandra at the beginning of the game. You choose if you want to be her brother Alexios or Cassandra herself. 70 to 80% in a poll that I saw online chose Cassandra. 70 to 80%. But female characters don't sell. You also had the option throughout the storyline for both Cassandra and Alexios, where you could make your character be LGBTQ. Samus of the Metroid series, and if you're a Super Smash Bros. Fan, you know all about Samus, is a female protagonist. The Alien franchise, Horizon Zero Dawn, as you mentioned. So you're telling me that female characters don't sell, but these are some of the biggest franchises in video games that I just listed off, and they're all led by a female protagonist. And I think this is part of, from what I read in the article, it's part of a larger toxic culture issue at Ubisoft. One female employee said, quote, "It's basically a frat house." Serge Ascoet, a longtime family friend and the CCO, was one of the several that was ousted earlier this month from Ubisoft. And I also feel like video games at large is still, unfortunately, a boys' club. But crap like this keeps us in the Stone Age. When you have things like Gamersgate, and we'll get into this, I think, in one of our future episodes about toxic fandoms. It's such a toxic thing, and it's all about, for me, one of my guiding ethos as a human, as an individual, is accountability. And when you have a company like this that's been operating since, I believe, 1998, as 5 brothers of the same family, and they were the gold standard, they could do no wrong, and it's just business as usual every single time something like this comes up. If a woman at the company proposes something and they are shot down immediately, I mean, this is a microcosm, a smaller view of what corporate America, unfortunately, is still like in 2020. It's accountability, and I'm so glad that the Me Too movement, took place within the last year or two, and that things are being brought to the forefront. People are being held accountable. I always liken it to an infection or an illness or a malady. If I have an infection and I just say, oh, it's business as usual, I'll be fine. I have a medical condition and I don't go to the doctor. I don't have it treated. It festers and it gets worse and it gets gangrenous and you start losing limbs. This needs to be diagnosed for what it is so you can treat it appropriately, and so you can change your frame of reference, you can change your point of view, and you can progress into the future, and you can have a healthier ethos in the workplace. And this is just one of those hot-button issues for me. And for me, like you said, it always goes back to, this seems to be a trend on our recent episodes, just tell a good story. If it's a male-female protagonist, if it's gender fluid, if it's an android, if it's a C-3PO and R2-D2 buddy cop, team up, it doesn't matter. Just tell a good story. So yeah, this is crushing for me as a fan of Ubisoft's content, especially with like Assassin's Creed and the Tom Clancy, The Division games are also under that moniker. So this is infuriating to me as a fan, and they may lose my business if they don't clean house and take care of business.
I shudder to think what would have happened if somebody at Guerrilla Games or at Sony would have said that when Horizon Zero Dawn was in development. I'm reaching the end of that game, and I know I'm late to the party on this, but voice actress Ashley Birch's performance in this is incredible. And completely helps to sell the character of Aloy and brings her to life. And it's just an absolutely fantastic game. And for somebody to then stand up and say, oh no, you can't have a female protagonist, that game won't sell that way, is incredibly disappointing. Chris, what is your big nerd news story for this week?
So, the release date for Christopher Nolan's Tenet film has been delayed indefinitely. I'm reading a Variety article here by Julia Alexander. The original release date for Nolan's film, starring John David Washington and Robert Pattinson, was July the 17th. Of course, that was delayed with the global pandemic of COVID-19. It was pushed back initially to July the 31st. Then it was pushed back again to August the 12th. And now it has been delayed indefinitely. I'm quoting Warner Brothers chairman Toby Emmerich here from his statement to Variety, quote, "We will share a new 2020 release date imminently for Tenet, Christopher Nolan's wholly original and mind-blowing feature." And this is just a really troubling thing for me. as a consumer of film content. In contrast, Disney Plus released Hamilton directly to the streaming service, and Disney CEO Bob Chapek said, quote, "It brought a lot of new people to the streaming service," end quote. And I'm quoting again here from Julia Alexander's part of the article. "So why wouldn't Warner Brothers move Tenet to a 100% digital release? Like everything in life, money. Christopher Nolan movies perform exceedingly well at the box office, and Tenet is the type of film that could have crossed $1 billion easily in non-pandemic times. Warner Brothers still clearly thinks that Tenet can produce a high source of revenue for the studio, and executives keep Nolan, a staunch believer in the theatrical experience, happy." End quote. And I think we talked about this off air, and that your feeling was that Nolan himself is a purist when it comes to my film should be seen in the theater. And I'm a fan of his work. Batman Begins and The Dark Knight were great films. Dark Knight Rises, not so much. Inception was one of my favorite films all time. I saw it 4 times in theaters. Still don't understand it to this day completely. But this is one of those films that I was really looking forward to. I'm a big fan of John David Washington's work. His performance in Black Klansman is just fantastic. I can't say enough about it. Apparently, it's in the genetics for the Washington family. He got it honestly from his father, Denzel. So this is extremely disappointing. I'm also interested to see, some more work from Robert Pattinson as we prepare for the Batman film, the Matt Reeves film that's coming up. So I was interested to see him in a more serious role that was not teeny bopper vampire nonsense. So it is highly disappointing, and maybe just me not being the purist when it comes to the theatrical experience. Being the head of a household for a large family, I have to pick and choose when I'm going to go to the movies. Also, being the head of a large household in a pandemic, I'm not going to the movie theaters, I'm sorry to tell you. So, I guess in the same air of how we fixed the Star Wars prequels recently, here's me fixing this problem. Here's my proposition. Why in the world would you not just do a $20 or $25 rental fee for like a 24-hour or 48-hour period? And some films, they did this. The Trolls film, I think they did like $20. And even a step further, if you want the same type of revenue or something close like that you would get in box office release, do it for $20 to $25, and you only get 24 hours to watch it. So if somebody watches it and they want to watch it again, they got to pay another $20 to $25, and you can still generate revenue in that way. This whole thing where it has to be in the theater, you have to experience this in IMAX, or you have to experience this in an actual movie theater. We don't have those luxuries nowadays. We in the day and time and the world that we live in, we have a global pandemic with no vaccine on the horizon. A theatrical release is just not reasonable at this point. So I'm at a loss for words. Make it $20 to $25 for an at-home release. You only get 24 hours to watch it, and if you want to watch it again, you have to pay again, and you still get a bunch of money. I don't know. Maybe I'm in the minority here. Dave, what do you think?
So I will say that I actually really, truly do enjoy the theatrical experience. And I've even made it a habit to go to theaters when they have revivals of older movies. It was an incredible pleasure several years ago for me to be able to watch the original Nightmare on Elm Street on the big screen, the original Friday the 13th on the big screen, and even the original Evil Dead on the big screen during Halloween time. I absolutely adore the communal experience. However, that being said, in the middle of a pandemic, that's just not realistic. Now, Nolan has said in the past in interviews that he finds his movies best watched in theaters. He's a big fan of this experience too. But I think we just need a reality check at this point. COVID-19 isn't going anywhere the way it seems. Even a highly effective vaccine is, based on news reports, not going to be available until early 2021. So instead of hiding the movie away, hoping for a global pandemic to go away, it should be out there. I agree with you. Take it directly to the consumer. Bypass the middleman. My 65-inch 4K TV will display this movie just fine. I do wish that this movie and several other movies would simply release as video on demand. Wonder Woman 1984 comes to mind, which I am so desperate to see after how amazing the first Wonder Woman was, it's not even funny. But here we sit, and we're waiting for a resolution to a problem that may be quite a while away.
Yeah, I feel the same thing with the MCU releases. We've had, Black Widow pushed back to November, and then you have WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier being pushed back. From my perspective, I'm thinking probably because chronologically Black Widow logically needs to take place first, and therefore they're delaying those series. So that's just my thinking. But, the same goes for that. Some kind of meet in the middle, this holding back until November. I'm sorry to tell you, I don't think it's going to be better in November either. So if you're hoping to see Black Widow in theaters in November, I'm sorry to tell you, I don't think that's going to be the case. Especially if there's nothing on the horizon until next year at the earliest, best case scenario. So again, I say release it, even on a rental, situation where you'd have to pay $20 every time you want to watch it until 2 weeks later, and then you can buy it for, buy it for $50, and then you really get your money's worth or whatever. I don't know. But holding fast to the traditionalist mindset when people are dying around the world, it seems like a really trivial thing to do.
I will go a step further and tell you that I think they should be worried about hacks or leaks. This is the kind of thing where a movie could very easily leak while it's just sitting there waiting for a release. It's happened before plenty of times in the past, and then whatever money they hope to make off of a box office release will simply not materialize because it's out there for everybody to see online anyways. Now, I'm not advocating piracy, don't get me wrong, but just historically speaking, it wouldn't be the first time a movie has either leaked completely or has been hacked. There was, in fact, a Sony hack a few years ago, if I remember correctly. So if it's just sitting there in storage, that would be something I would be very worried about.
Absolutely, and why would you not want to get out in front of this? And you control it. You control the market. You control the dollar, the bottom line. So, I mean, you could be in control of this. If you're a big corporation like Warner Brothers or Disney or Marvel Studios, I mean, like, you control the bottom line with all of this. So, I just feel like it's silly to sit here and play like everything's going to be okay in a couple of months. It doesn't look that way. So when we come back from this, our first break, we're going to have an exclusive interview with comic artist Luciano Vecchio. Stick around. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Nerd Byword podcast. We are here with comic book artist Luciano Vecchio. You may have seen his work in Ironheart. You may have seen his work on Young Justice, and also in his recently released in English creator-owned original graphic novel Sereno, which is fantastic, and you can find that on Comixology for just $2.99, and I highly recommend it. I've read it myself, and from my own perspective, I highly recommend that. So, Luciano, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So our first question is what the entire world has been dealing with, Luciano. What has quarantine been like in Argentina?
It's been long. It's been long. Personally, it's been a little rough at first. We here in Buenos Aires, in the capital city, is where the epicenter is. So the rest of the country is pretty much in a much better situation right now. We started very early with the quarantine, so the numbers have been kept low, and the death count has been relatively low compared to other places, but the result of that is that it's been very long and it takes its toll personally and psychologically. But it's interesting. I mean, I can't complain personally. I live by myself. I have the material security to overcome this and I don't know, survive. Interesting time.
So, Luciano, our very first episode that we did on our podcast, we were talking about our nerd origin stories, the things that we fell in love with that made us nerdy. What are some of the first nerdy things that you fell in love with? Comics, movies, television? What got you started on this path in the comic book world?
I think it was a combination of cartoons on TV, comics, and toys, probably, like action figures. I have an older brother, like 11 years older than me, and he used to collect the Spanish translation of DC Comics from early 80s. So I was already born in an environment that had comics around at home, and those were like part of my imagination and playground, even way before I learned how to read. So I always drew comics and superheroes, and I don't know, the first time I learned how to fold some pieces of paper in the middle and start drawing my own made up comic books. That was part of my. I must have been like around 6 years old when I did that and never stopped. So yeah, I remember like some pre-crisis DC comics from the early 80s as the very first that I read. Then a lot of merch that later I realized that it was based on José Luis García López style guide. I think that set the spirit of the style that keeps attracting me over the years, like iconic, wholesome, like inspiring superheroics.
That's fantastic. Now, as far as like being an artist, do you have particular artists that you kind of modeled your work after that you would say are great influences to your style or even wanting to become a comic book artist?
I think that there were some that were that strong influence when I was younger, when I was like in my teens, like, I don't know, George Perez, José Luis García López, Phil Jimenez. I wanted to be that kind of realistic artist, but when I started consuming manga and anime, I started like combining the influences with I don't know, the expressivity, the simplicity, and when the Bruce Timm cartoon shows came out, it was like a change of paradigm for me. Like, oh, this can be done a whole different way, and it's still incredibly seductive. And so I started mixing stuff, and so by now I don't feel like I can cite particular people, but like more like currents. I know, and sometimes like I don't know. Recently, I have been studying more Chris Anka's style because it's an artist I really like, and I will do this from time to time, like reconnect with someone's work and try to study how they, I don't know, construct figures or figure out how they do what they do and see what resonates with my style.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So you kind of blended a lot of different artistic influences over time.
Yeah.
So, as a member of the LGBTQ community, your work frequently features representation for this group. What does it mean to you to carry a banner, so to speak, for other individuals in that group worldwide?
I don't know if I think of it in those terms. I think I do what is honest and sincere for me, and I can't not be visible and vocal and compromise with the causes and struggles of my collective. And I think it's inevitable. It shows in my work. But also I try to keep it, I don't know, like that sincere fun. I struggle sometimes with this, but I think it's better when I don't take myself too seriously, you know. But I think the message is better communicate that way. But yeah, for example, when given the chance, I was able to do this story in the Marvel Voices special. I knew I wanted to do that from an activism standpoint. It's something I always wanted to see, like every queer superhero coming together because of their shared political identity as LGBTQ. So yeah, when I got the chance to do it and they let me write it and draw it and color it, that's like a highlight for me. And I hope I get to do more of that. I don't know.
Just speaking personally, I know for myself, my son is 10 years old. He'll be 11 next month. But as a biracial child, when Miles Morales, he first discovered like Miles Morales, and he saw someone that looked like him, that meant so much to him. And he also recently came out to me and my wife and said that he was gay. And I remember reading what you said about Sereno, specifically on, I believe it was like the DeviantArt page, that you never really had anybody that was kind of like you. So I'm really interested and excited to share Sereno with him and someone that, you know, that he can relate to. He also walks around barefoot all the time, so I know that he can relate to that.
I hope he like it. That means a lot. That's very moving. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, on the same note, I would be remiss if I didn't share that I am a huge X-Men fan. And the X-Men and mutants as a whole are largely seen as symbols for any group that has been discriminated against, whether that be to racist discrimination or discrimination against LGBTQ community. And you know, recently getting online, especially Twitter and Instagram, I have found that a large portion of X-Men fans are also lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. Do you particularly have any favorite mutants that you love to work with? Because I see a lot of your art features mutants. Do you have any favorites?
Luckily, I think that because of what you mentioned, a lot of the people that ask commissions from me are mutant fans and X-Men fans, and they keep me busy with mutant characters to draw, which I love. I don't know. Aesthetically and thematically, I think some of my favorite are Storm and Nightcrawler. But I like what you mentioned is very true, that the X-Men always represented metaphorically the oppressed groups. But I like when the characters actually belong to those groups on page. Like Iceman, like Fling. So I don't know. I'm, for example, when the Iceman books were out, I used to think, well, I would love to draw this book in particular. And I wasn't an Iceman fan, but I liked the theme and how it was approached. So I'm open to whatever character that is an X-Men and LGBTQ or or that puts on page the actual struggle of an oppressive group beyond the metaphor.
Right.
I think that we are at the moment in time. It's happening already that the stories are more based on real life, and we don't need the metaphor as much as we used to. So that's what I like of mutant characters at the moment.
Yeah, and I think one of the most powerful panels that I've seen recently, I think it was the X-Men #8 that Jonathan Hickman did, and I think Lino Francis Yu was the artist, where it was centered around Mystique and Destiny, and they were kind of giving her the runaround, and she breaks down and just says, "I want my wife back," and it was so powerful.
Yeah, and finally it's being said on page and not just
hinted around
suggested or hinted around.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, Mystique is another one now.
Now, you also frequently work with younger characters on titles like Ironheart and Young Justice and even New Warriors. What's your favorite part of working with those kinds of characters that skew more towards the teenage years?
I think there's a few aspects. Aesthetically, I think my style fits better for this kind of characters. I used to be told that my style was too cartoony or too young for mainstream superheroes, and I like that over the years that those notions changed enough for me to be given the chance to work with them anyway. But I think there is a quality of my work, especially because I combine this anime and manga influence. And that makes me think when in manga and anime we tend to see a lot of teenage protagonists. I don't know, they must be like the higher percentage of manga protagonists. And it also takes me to my teenage years and the idealism and the raw strength and drama and all that. I think I still connect with those feelings, and I like making contact with that and producing a material that, as we mentioned before, that I would have loved to read at that age. I don't know if that made any sense, but it's
makes perfect sense. Yeah, absolutely.
No, it absolutely does. I think that's, for me personally, my first, one of my first nerdy things was Spider-Man and Peter Parker. And, he was different in the 1960s. It almost didn't get made because, editorial said, you can't have a 16-year-old superhero. Like, no one wants to read about a kid or a teenager. And I think that's one of the strengths about, Peter Parker as Spider-Man, and now Miles as Spider-Man he's a teenager, and he still has like all those optimistic views, and he's hopeful, and he's positive minded, and he believes that he's doing the right thing, and I totally agree with everything that you said.
Yes, and when I was younger, I also connected more with characters like the Teen Titans and even Robin. When I would see the 60s Batman show with Batman and Robin, I will connect with Robin. I wanted to be him.
Now, Luciano, you've become somewhat famous, especially online, for your character redesigns. You'll take, like, for example, a character like Storm, and the variety of costumes and suits that she's had through the years, and kind of do like this crazy mashup. Where did that idea come from, and do you have a favorite, a particular favorite redesign?
I don't know. It's an exercise I like. I think over the time I realized I like redesigning classic characters more than designing new ones, because I like doing this, like laying every costume they were in their history in front of me and trying to pick the elements that make it iconic, that tell the story, and I don't know, like synthesize to the minimum elements that will still read as this character at their core. So I really love doing that. I don't know. I really like the Storm one I did is it has been a hit. I recently just randomly did a Phoenix one, but Miss Marvel Phoenix mashup, and I really like that one. A few years ago, I did a series of reimagining the new goals, all the characters of the Fourth World as a Saturday morning cartoon aesthetic, and those are really fun too. I don't know, it's not something I plan. It's what I do in my free time, and sometimes I get to do it in projects I'm working on, like with Silhouette when she was introduced in Ironheart. But yeah, it's what I do for fun, and sometimes I get paid for it.
Well, you can definitely tell looking at some of those designs that you were having a lot of fun with that.
So what is it like, Luciano, kind of working in Argentina, especially with writers in the United States? What does that whole artist and writer dynamic look like when you're in a different country?
Well, it is long distance. It's mostly written in my case. I mean, my spoken English, as you can notice, is not that good as I write and read. But yeah, it depends on every collaboration. It's a different relationship that you build. But basically, the editors do most of the work, assigning me the script. Most of my career, I didn't even get much contact with the writers. I just got to deliver the pages. But over the years, it's become more human and connected, and that's nice. I prefer that. But yeah, it changes all the time from assignment to assignment.
Now, you also recently released your creator-owned project, Sereno. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yes, Sereno is the first long project that I wrote and did the art myself. I did it first as a webcomic here in Argentina in Spanish, and it's the work of over 2 years of producing one weekly page aside of my main workload. So this was what I was doing for fun, so it was exploring the superhero genre through freedom, through creating this queer superhero archetype that, as we mentioned, I felt didn't exist when I was young. I know, and exploring different themes that I was interested in at the time, like mysticism and psychology, and coded as superhero battles. So yeah, all that converges in a comic about a superhero called Sereno, who is warrior of light defending the city of Nueva Teia from the monsters and creatures that emerge when the sun sets down. And well, yeah, then it was released in Spanish a little while ago, and now with the quarantine and all the extra time we have to stay at home and focus your energy somewhere, and this was one of the pending things on my list that I wanted to do, that was getting it translated, corrected, and released in English for English readers, and I'm so happy to finally having been able to do that.
Now, having read Sereno, the first things that pop into my brain are like the neon colors. It's so stark. It stands out so much. I think like it's almost like a tribute to like the movie Tron, like super futuristic and stuff like that. Also like the allegories to like mass media and mental health and the matter of perception and how it can just like push you down. Those first couple of stories especially. So where did you draw inspiration for all of this for Sereno?
Well, from everywhere, like visually from, I don't know, I usually describe it as a mix of Batman Beyond and Sailor Moon because it's like a magic boy archetype, like using the magic girl archetype on a queer boy. But the world he inhabits is very technological, futuristic, and has this strong aesthetic. But thematically, I don't know. Well, Grant Morrison's work and writing is a big influence. I was reading Supergirls at the moment, so I was in the mindset of channeling an archetype for our age. For I don't know if Superman and Batman were the archetypes that emerged from the late 19 series. What was the archetype I wanted to channel from my perspective in 2014 when I started? So that was like part of the mindset, like, and once I had the hero, like the villains started to appear as an answer to that, and so yeah, my own personal spiritual processes and where are part of this and those of people I know. So it has some very personal elements, personal for me and for people I know. So yeah, I guess that's the material, the prime material that I use to create this.
Now, as you mentioned, this started as a webcomic in Argentina back in 2014, and the version that our listeners will find on Comixology is in English. Is there a way that we can access the original Spanish? You know, as a fluent Spanish speaker myself, I want it all. I want both. I want English and Spanish. So is there a place to find the Spanish version?
Yes, it is. It's all accessible for free in Spanish. It was part of a collective called Totem Comics. So the webpage is totemcomics.com.ar, and there's a lot of material from many local authors doing superheroes through very personal perspectives, and I think you will find a lot of interesting stuff there.
So I'll have to send my students there. I've been a Spanish teacher for 10 years, so that'll be an interesting way during, especially if we go to online teaching, I'll have to assign them comics to read in Argentina.
Yeah, I would say when you said Batman Beyond meets Sailor Moon, I think you got a lot of people interested just by saying that. That sounds fascinating. That is such an interesting mashup. Now, are there any other projects that you have coming up that you can share with our audience?
Nothing I can really talk about right now. But I don't know. Well, I'm a lot of things in the air right now. I think going back to your first question, part of this period of quarantine and I don't know, rethinking everything is for me meant to take a step back and look at what I want to do, how I want to do it, and trying to reconnect with some more personal expressions that I didn't pay much attention to lately. So that's more like something like a working process. It's not nothing specific that I can share right now.
Secrets, ladies and gentlemen. Luciano, we thank you so much for your time. Where can our listeners find you on social media?
Well, all my social networks are Luciano Vecchio. Instagram is Luciano Vecchio Art, and Twitter is just my name, and Facebook too. So if you Google Luciano Vecchio, Vecchio, I show up.
Thank you so much for this interview. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, Sereno, you can find it on Comixology. Just $2.99, and you get what is it? It's equivalent of 10 issues of a comic book, something like that. It's so great. So
it is
great.
100 and something pages.
Yes, it's fantastic. So it's as we talk about in America, we talk about bang for your buck. For $2.99, you get 114 pages of a comic. It's a fantastic value.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, and stay safe, Luciano.
You too.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, when we return from this, our second and final break, we will hit you with 2 more nerd commendations for another week. Ladies and gents, we're back here on the Nerd Byword with our final segment, Nerd Commendations, for yet another week. Dave, what do you have for us?
Oh, I have something special this time. I'm a nerd for many things. One of those things is scary movies. I'm particularly fond of the 1970s and 80s horror movie period that gave rise to stuff like Friday the 13th, Halloween, and A Nightmare on Elm Street. In 2010, a documentary was released that I just recently finally had a chance to sit down and watch. It's called Never Sleep Again, The Elm Street Legacy. It chronicles the entire Nightmare on Elm Street franchise and the rise of New Line Cinema. The documentary clocks in at a whopping 240 minutes, and every minute of this documentary is awesome. The movie features over 106 interviews, behind-the-scenes footage, storyboards, concept art, and narration is provided by the star of the original film, Heather Langenkamp. Since the movie was independently financed, there is absolutely no studio interference. Every interview subject gets to be as candid as they want to be, which allows the documentary to paint a fuller picture of the making of these movies. And I think, for Freddy Krueger fans and horror fans in general, this is a must-see documentary. Obviously, I didn't watch it in one sitting at 4 hours long. I just split it up between a couple of evenings, but it was absolutely worth the time investment. It's just some really fascinating stories behind the scenes of how some of these movies came together.
Okay, so this may have, if we extended our things we're not nerdy about episode, I believe it was our 3rd episode, this may have been one of the things that I'm not nerdy about, but horror films, at a very young age, I was kind of screwed up by watching the first Jurassic Park film at 4 years old. So scary stuff has never really been on my to-do list. I braved it a couple of times, but yeah, the first Jurassic Park, particularly that scene with the velociraptors, where they're just waiting in, I don't know if it was a cafeteria or something, where they're all hiding out from the velociraptor. So that screwed me up, and kind of have PTSD every time I see something that is remotely scary. But you win me over potentially with something with the word documentary. That's you got me there with a documentary. I remember being like an introverted nerd in high school and watching the History Channel when it actually had actual history stuff on it, and not when they had Ice Road Truckers and Swamp People and Rednecks Are Us content. Back when it was actually the History Channel, and I would watch entire series of documentaries and stuff like that. National Geographic. So maybe from that aspect, I can give this a look. But I may need have all the lights on in the house.
I will say that when it comes to the History Channel, you have to treat it the way you treat MTV. If you want to see music videos, you need to go to MTV2. If you want to see history documentaries, you need to go to History Channel International. You can't actually watch the original channel you're not
There
going
we
to get the
go.
content you're looking for there anymore. Yeah, so Chris, what is your nerd commendation?
Yeah, okay, so I'm going a little bit different here this week. I am recommending a video game that is by no means a AAA, gotta have it video game. But hear me out here. I am recommending Power Rangers Battle for the Grid. You can find this game on PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, Steam, and Google Stadia. $20, so not too expensive. It's also included in Xbox Game Pass, so if you're a subscriber to that service, as I believe both of us are, you can download that for free. For me, this was just a heavy dose of nostalgia. It's all the characters that you grew up loving if you watched the Power Rangers back in the 90s. The Green Ranger with that iconic outfit and that awesome flute. It's a side-by-side fighting game a la Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter or Injustice. It's a really simple format. As I said, it's by no means a AAA title, but it's just fun. Like, for example, my wife does not like video games. She would much rather read novels. She's nerdy about other things. She'll cosplay and read books and stuff like that. But when it comes to video games, but this is like the stamp of approval. And she's like, okay, give me my controller. I want to play. So if I can win her over, it's a recommendation for me. It's great for playing with friends, especially kids. It's got a really cheesy storyline in the story mode, but that's same things you would find in the episodes from when we were kids. It has an online feature as well, but as you know, that's not my thing. I don't think it's your thing, Dave. Online gaming, but it's just really fun. And if I can be the Black Ranger with that iconic Mastodon helmet, and the controls are relatively easy. It's pretty straightforward. Just one of those mash 'em button type games. It was just fun to play. It is not this deep, intuitive type thing. Sometimes I just like the sensory things of cool things that I like. Don't overthink it, and this is one of those things. So Power Rangers Battle for the Grid is my nerd commendation for this week.
So I turned on my Xbox the other day again for the first time in a while since I've been playing on my PlayStation 4 Horizon Zero Dawn. And I realized I got something like 490 games installed on that machine, which is really scary. So I've not actually played Power Rangers Battle for the Grid yet, although it's on Xbox Game Pass. But it does sound really good. I love a good fighting game. Back in the day, I loved playing Street Fighter on my Super Nintendo. So I looked up some reviews, and they all seem to indicate that the gameplay is really solid. It's a lot of fun. But there was some griping about content, particularly that 9 characters were added later via DLC. And so they felt that there weren't enough characters accessible on the ground level of the game. Do you agree with that assessment?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, it's very minimalistic, but as I would think of, like, if you had something you want your kids to play with you, or if you have nieces and nephews or family over, if you're having like a Halloween party or a Christmas party and you had a bunch of young kids over, it's something that you could throw up on the screen and you wouldn't have to worry about, a bunch of gore like you would with Mortal Kombat or stuff like that. Now, I will say, here's a bonus. This is a 2-for-1 special nerd commendation. I also just purchased on sale the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Edition. So you say Street Fighter, that's music to my ears as well. So they had a Capcom publisher sale on the Microsoft store, the Microsoft Digital Store, which we have advocated time and again. But I got the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Edition, and it comes with every version of Street Fighter that was available on those retro consoles that we love. The original 87 version, Street Fighter 2, which was one of the first video games I ever played on the SNES. The Turbo version, all of those, and you can play there's 8 different versions. So the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Edition on the Xbox as well. Definitely check that one out. But yeah, I would totally agree with that assessment. It's very minimalistic, but as I said, it's fun. It is what it is. I'm not there for a deep dive storyline. I'll go to Red Dead Redemption 2 for that. I will go to Assassin's Creed for that, as long as they sort that crap out at Ubisoft. I will go to, another, insert title for that. But it's just button mashing fun.
Well, it sounds awesome. I'm definitely going to have to give that a try after I finish Horizon Zero Dawn.
Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up another episode of the Nerd Byword podcast. We thank you so much for joining us this week. If you like the show and you want to hear some more, please find us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Give us a rate and review. Give us those 5 stars. You can also find us on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, @NerdByWord. You can also find us on Facebook @TheNerdByWord, and we look forward to bringing you future content. If you enjoyed today's interview, I'll tell you, we've got some great ones lined up here in the weeks to come as well.
Yeah, some really exciting stuff in the pipeline for the Nerd Byword podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in yet again. We truly appreciate you.
Also, this is a recent development. If you enjoy what you're listening to week in and week out, if you would do us a favor and go to ratethispodcast.com, ratethispodcast.com/nerdbyword, and it is like a centralized location on where you can submit reviews and ratings on there. So again, that is ratethispodcast.com/nerdbyword. We would greatly appreciate any and all feedback. We know our buddy, the Tech Lord @LexPendragon. Here you get a shout out, buddy. He called us out on Stargirl and any and all commentary. We want to be able to defend our positions as well. So anything that you have to say about the show, anything that you want to see going forward, ideas for future episodes, we want to hear from you, our audience. So thanks again for another week, and stay well, guys, and stay nerdy.
The Nerd Byword is produced by 2 nerds, Kris and Dave, to encompass all aspects of the nerd multiverse. The theme music was written by Al Jimenez. Our show art features original art by Ashby Design, as well as public domain comic pens. Find us online at nerdbyword.com, on Twitter @nerdbyword, and send questions and comments to nerdbyword@gmail.com.